A huge thank you to patron Al H for suggesting today's video topic. If you want to suggest a topic for next Wednesday's Name Explain video, all you have to do is support Name Explain on Patreon for $1 a month. Find out more by visiting patreon.com/nameexplain, which will be linked down below. Anyway, we tend to think of letters of the alphabet as kind of a package deal, a group of 26 little symbols that all came along as a single unit and are all BFFs or something. Yet in reality, that isn't quite the case. The alphabet we use today is more a patchwork of sorts. Some letters have been added later down the line, and some dropped entirely. J, for example, was only added in the 16th century, and the sound it makes was represented with I for a long time. This makes J the newest letter of the Latin alphabet. But if there's a newest letter in the alphabet, then that must mean there's an oldest letter too. Seemingly, out of the 26 little guys we use on a daily basis, there is one in particular that gets the title of the oldest letter, with that being none other than the letter of O. O is a really interesting little letter, sitting at 15th in the alphabet as well as being the 4th vowel. The sound it makes, the O sound, is so deeply rooted in our language and speech. It's one of those innate sounds we're just able to produce. The sound even appears naturally in language and not just in the construction of words. We make O-like sounds when we're excited, shocked, sad, or just a little bit underwhelmed. That's just the sound of O, however. The shape of the letter itself is equally innate and natural as the sound it makes. O, in both its upper and lowercase forms, consists of just a simple circle. This really is one of the most basic shapes we have at our disposal, and it's probably something we've been drawing on parchment or carving into walls for millennia. So many things in the natural world can be boiled down to just circles too, like our eyes, various fruits, and of course the sun and moon. With just how innate the sound and shape of the letter O is, it's easy to see why it's considered the oldest letter of the alphabet. And by the way, when I say that I mean the Latin alphabet specifically. There may very well be symbols from other writing systems in other languages which are way older than this still used to this day. But while it might be easy to claim this, I think calling O the oldest letter should really come with a huge asterisk. And that's because when we say that O is the oldest letter, what exactly do we mean by this? In my estimation, a letter is composed of 3 key elements: the sound it makes, the name of the letter itself, and the shape of the symbol. For example, this is called a P, it makes a P sound, and the symbol is composed of a vertical line with a semicircle of sorts jutting out from its top right. Letters contain way more information than you may think at first. So what one of these elements makes it so old? First off, the name isn't that old. The symbol being called an O only really dates back to the Romans and their Latins, which yes, was a long time ago, but we can go further than that. As for the sound it makes, well, it's hard to figure out how old that is, as spoken language really can't be traced all that well when compared to written language for fairly obvious reasons. Ancient people weren't recording themselves like we do now, as they simply didn't have the technology to do so. Still, we can imagine that the O sound is fairly old, simply because it's such an innate sound we make. Like when we think of prehistoric people, they normally make an O sound of sorts. While its name isn't that old, and we can't know for sure how old the sound it makes is, its symbol is the element of this letter that we can deduce as being old, as it's from this shape as to why it receives the title of oldest letter, as we will see. So when we say that O is the oldest letter, what we are really saying is that it's the letter of the oldest symbol in the Latin alphabet that has gone unchanged. Like I said, there's an asterisk in all of this in my eyes. But many sources still like to call it the oldest letter, and it even has that title in none other than the Guinness Book of World Records. If it has their seal of approval, then who am I to judge? And speaking of books, I have a new book coming out too. Immigrant Tongues, Exploring How Languages Moved, Evolved and Defined Us, is a book all about the migrations of languages across our planet. I actually haven't written a script for this one. I completely forgot to write a book plug for this video, so I'm just making this off the top of my dome, but go pre-order it. I've done so much plugging the book. Go check it out. There'll be a link down below. Ta. So how exactly did O end up being the oldest symbol still used today? Well, the symbol has its origins in one of the oldest and most beloved writing systems that we know of, ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. These symbols are attached to the minds of many people who grew up fascinated by the mysteries of Egypt and probably watched way too many weird documentaries on the History Channel or something. Thanks to centuries of research, hieroglyphs today are actually pretty decipherable. We know that the system contains a huge variety of symbols. Some of these symbols represent specific sounds like the modern Latin alphabet, and some represent whole ideas, like kanji in Japanese for example. One of the symbols found in hieroglyphs is this, a a human eye. We know that while this could literally just mean eye, it could also have somewhat more metaphorical meanings too, meaning things like to see or to watch. The symbol's name is Aya too, which sounds a little bit like eye as we know it today. Egyptian hieroglyphs went on to be hugely influential in other languages and their written forms too, one of particular interest to us being the language of Phoenician. The Phoenician people are believed to have come into being around 1500 BC. They were a collection of people who lived around the Mediterranean. A notable Phoenician power is ancient Carthage, an empire that almost brought an end to Rome in its prime. Their language of Phoenician is seen to have come into being around 1300 BC, and the symbols they used to represent their language in written form drew inspiration from the hieroglyphs of ancient Egypt. If we look at their alphabet today, many of its symbols look incredibly alien to us, while some do look a tad more like modern letters. Interestingly enough, this guy here that looks like a W actually went on to become the modern letter of S, hence why W isn't seen as the oldest letter, along with O or anything like that. But among these strange and ancient symbols, you will probably spot a simple little circle. This guy is the precursor to the letter we know as O today, and from its inception in the Phoenician alphabet, well over 3,000 years ago, its shape has never changed. That is very impressive, and the lack of change to its design probably stems from not only how simple the symbol is, but just how intrinsic the idea of a circle is to us. The symbol was born here more or less perfectly, and hasn't needed to evolve since. It really is the horseshoe crab of the alphabet. But then again, this is where the asterisk comes into play once more. While this Phoenician letter looks exactly like our letter of O, and would go on to become O as we know it today, when the Phoenicians were knocking around, they didn't call it an O, and it didn't make that traditional O style sound either. Instead, this letter was called ayin in the Phoenician language, and it made a sound which is technically referred to as a voiced pharyngal fricative, which is a consonant type sound for those like myself who don't fully comprehend those big fancy words or know how to pronounce them correctly. All we really need to know, however, is that while this symbol was the same as our modern letter, the name and sound it made were a far cry from the modern letter of O, meaning it only really ticks off one of those aforementioned three elements that go into a letter. But in the same way that Egyptian hieroglyphs would go on to influence alphabets like the Phoenician one, this alphabet too went on to shape many others. The Phoenician ayin went on to feature in many other languages. One of interest has to be the Hebrew alphabet. In Hebrew, the letters kept the name of ayin to this very day and still makes a similar sound, but its symbol has changed completely and looks somewhat like the Latin letter of Y. It's not too surprising to see the letter appear in Hebrew, as both Hebrew and Phoenician are both Semitic languages. What's of most interest to us, however, is the fact that the Phoenician alphabet would go on to be a huge inspiration for the Greek alphabet. The Greeks took the symbols the Phoenicians used, but adapted them somewhat in their design, and changed the sounds they represented too. For example, the Aleph symbol used in Phoenician was rotated 90 degrees and became Alpha in Greek. And of course it would become A in Latin eventually. The Greeks, however, made no changes to the actual design of the ayin letter, and why would you? It's just a little circle. What they did change, however, was its name, becoming known as Omicron in the language, and its sound changed too, with the Greeks applying a sound technically referred to as a closed mid-backrounded vowel to it, which is just a fancy name for the typical or sound we all know and love. So the Egyptians inspired the Phoenicians, and the Phoenicians inspired the Greeks, and the Greeks of course inspired the Romans. Their alphabet of Latin was adapted from the Greek alphabet, with many letters using the same sounds and shapes as the Greeks. They however changed the names of these letters, and it was the Romans who gave this letter the name of O, when it became part of the Latin alphabet, like it is known under to this very day. O has gone on quite the journey, that's for sure, from Egyptian to Phoenician to Greek to Latin. But what I find really interesting is when we compare each of O's precursor letters with those three elements I mentioned earlier of name, sound and shape to the modern O. The Egyptian ear symbol didn't have the same name, sound or shape of it. The Phoenician ayin symbol had the same shape but lacked the same sound or name. The Greek Omicron had the same shape and sound as the modern O but lacked the name. It was only with its Latin form that was finally able to tick all three boxes. But by this point so did pretty much every other letter that we know using the Latin alphabet. It's almost a ship of Theseus situation we have on our hands here. If somehow O changed its shape in another evolution of the alphabet, then it would be completely removed from its origins. This is why while O is seen as the oldest letter, I still think it's only kind of the oldest one. but maybe I'm being a bit too cynical in all of this. The fact remains that since this symbol came into being in the Phoenician alphabet around 3,500 years ago, its design has not changed at all, which is incredibly remarkable. And this is why O gets that title of the oldest letter. Fine, I'll let Guinness World Records have this one, I suppose. You win this time. Name Explain depends on viewers like yourself supporting the channel financially on Patreon, so a huge thank you to everyone who does. Donating just $1 a month helps the channel amazingly and gets you bonuses including ad-free videos, exclusive content, the power to request ideas to be made into actual Name Explain videos, and your name at the end of the video with all these awesome people. Visit patreon.com/NameExplain or click the link down below to find out how you too can support the channel. Thank you. Thanks for reaching the end of the video. Why not watch another and subscribe to keep up to date on all things Name Explain. You can find myself on Instagram where I'm Name Explain YT, and join the Facebook group Friends of Name Explain to talk with myself and other name nerds. All that will be linked down below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and once again, thank you all so much.